another like leg of Black Lives Matter, like there's a room next door we can go into also. So this started with Elaine and I having a conversation about about Baltimore. Well, the host group was having a text discussion about, are you okay? Like, I don't know, I was talking about what I did that day or whatever. And then Elaine starts you want to say it like?
Yeah, just a like rural white person town in Texas.
Say that again.
A rural white person town in Texas.
Oh, yeah, well, we have those in mind.
Right. Yeah. Just like old white people who don't care about Baltimore.
Right. They don't care about Baltimore, they don't care about Ferguson, they don't care about,
and they
read the news.
Yeah, and they appreciate their police, like.
Right.
And,
Yeah, they're just doing their job.
right, yeah.
And mute that.
Yeah.
Got you, Nick.
Right. Understand.
Can you just mute that?
Right. No, I've tried.
Okay, I'm so saying that to you from now on. Not you. Can you just mute that? Okay. Now I'm gonna go. Can you put that on vibrate? But never mind. So the discussion really was, how do we talk to predominantly white churches, or let's just say white churches? Let's just get over that right now.
Yeah.
How do we talk to our white churches on why this matters to us and why it matters to them, or why it maybe should? And I actually took that discussion to my confirmation class. This, like.
Yeah, that's the only group in my church that was talking about it.
Right. And of course, for my kids, they're like, oh my God, that happened Monday. This is Sunday. Like, so, yeah. So they're like, God, we've been talking about this all week. We were out of school for 2 days because, But the idea was that we actually ended up on a really good discussion about Christianity and activism and why activism is a Christian.
A discipline?
A discipline. So, anyway, but I don't have, in the way that Elaine does, I don't have the mass pushback. Like, or at least, so anyway,
like,
this also came out of, or no. Well, anyway, this came after a blog post that I wrote on the day after the riots, talking about, like, the way I grew up in the South, the language that was used in my household, the jokes, the words, my friends, how they were treated by my family, how my family still to this day treats.
But let's just be clear, this is not the South, just the South.
No, I understand, but that was my experience.
And it was the same thing, same experience.
So, like, simultaneously in my household,
right.
Derek's writing a blog about growing up African American,
right.
And I'm writing a blog about growing up white and privileged.
Right.
And this is like happening, we're like sitting across the couches typing. Because it's Monday night and we're kind of going crazy, and this is happening, miles away. And anyway, so all of this, so that's where this came from, was we don't, the reason why I wrote my blog post was to say, we don't talk about this.
Yeah.
Like, we never talk about this. And that is not okay. Like, it's not okay for me to be silent because I'm embarrassed about.
Or because I don't know how to talk.
Or because I don't know how to talk about it. So that's how this started.
Yes.
Was if we just need to not be afraid as the white church to talk openly about this, because we might say something wrong, we might step in a hole, we might, like, even if we're like past, which I guess my experience in the churches, we're past, and this is part of the problem, blatant racism, like absolute spoken, whatever. But it's the ingrained, it's the underneath, it's the systemic issue, and that how, like, us not talking about it is not the same as, yeah. So that is where that's where I'm coming from with this topic. Now, so we'll just keep going with that. And then, like I said, if somebody else wants to do another branch of this, please, and I will also say, for me, the answer wasn't again, let's just not be afraid. We'll talk about it. I don't even care what's happening. For me, the answer was well, let's bring in a Black person on Sunday. That's not the point for me. The point was for me to stand up and say, and I'll actually say, and Jen and Sarah, you guys can talk to about what you did that week, after that week, during, we were all in meetings with clergy. We were all, we were downtown cleaning up. We work in a neighborhood, actually where Tom Harris's church is. And I went there because I have a relationship in that neighborhood, and a lot of the stores got looted. And I just walked up and down the streets of the streets that we work in. And I put on my clergy shirt and just walked up and down and had a discussion. And all I did on Sunday was discuss what they told me about how they were feeling and what was going on. And the reaction of the congregation was very beautiful, to be able to just kind of not, to not politicize it anymore. And that was the issue.
So can I interject something? So I love that. Great. No question. You all are in driving distance and able to do on the ground discussion. From Columbia, Missouri, I can't do that.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Now,
we couldn't until 2 weeks ago. I mean.
Right. But ironically enough,
Don't ask.
well, right, I don't want that. I mean, I'm a couple hours from Ferguson, so it's not really it's not really a far absent thing or a huge different thing, but it is then we talked about that. We talked about Ferguson quite a bit at my church, but we didn't talk much about Baltimore aside from generic prayers for safety of all kind of thing. But it's we got to work on how do we take that to the next, when it's not happening in our back door and we can't tell on the ground stories. That's what I want to know. That's why I thought about it. It's how do we do it with a balanced way and a good way? And it's and I had a little bit of an in. My brother lives in Baltimore and he was out photographing. He's a photographer and he was out photographing everything. And it's I was able to share and talk about with my folks, literally, look, these are the photographs my brother took today.
Which, by the way, I made it on CNN.
His pictures were on CNN and he had publicity for it, which was awesome.
Yeah.
But yet, not the point of what he was doing. But yeah, so
well, that's another
I had a
discussion we're
personal
having is how to
connection,
not
that's the way I
become
leveraged it. So that's the way I brought it up in my context. But I'm curious about some of the rest of y'all who are near there how you brought it up or what ways you talked about it.
I have kind of a vested interest in this, but I have to say that I didn't have a vested interest in this until we adopted our boy from Ethiopia. Okay. So in conversations with people, we start to have conversations about the conversations that we're going to have with our child as he grows up, the fears that we have about him. And often the pushback we get is, oh, well, you're raising him right.
Right.
You're raising him right. With values, with white values.
Yeah.
And this is not subtle. I mean, it is
No,
subtle.
right, no. Well,
Shannon, I'd like to return to my original question.
Yeah.
Because it's important to me to know if we're going to have a conversation where we're going to spend some time in catharsis and share personal experiences of frustration or failure or how we related to certain instances, or if we're going to have a conversation about resourcing one another. And maybe those two have an overlap, but I'm only asking because in a limited amount of time, I think a conversation like this, personally, I think it has to have some real clarity because we could spend an entire retreat, a 3-day, a week, on these kinds of things, really to create some intimacy, really be able to share
Right.
feelings and experiences, and then also have other conversations where we resourced and told each other. But we have a limited amount of time, and so we should know what we're trying to do together.
So I mean, I love personal story, it's my bag, but like, that's for one-on-one, I think, like, and again, like, we have multiple rooms. Where I want to come down is more of the addressing a systemic problem that happens to be front page news that I consider to be a significant faith issue. And our like fear about addressing that. So again, feel free to disagree.
Well, but that's, I mean, that's where my
Hold on,
question
Mary,
comes.
She's been waiting on.
To respond to, for me, what I'm hearing is that we would like, you're looking for a conversation where we say, this is a significant faith issue, front page news, how are we gonna talk about it in our public? Or in our context, where we have an area of influence, you know, how do we talk about it, which does sometimes include personal stories.
Yeah.
But we're going a little more meta.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say that what Nick said inspired in me what I felt like I tried to do the best I could, because I had your bug and Derek's bug, and we have Cleveland, and we're, you know, Cleveland's in the middle of this, I mean, we're all in the middle of it, but we're there too, and for me, I think what I felt that the most important thing I could do in my sphere of influence was try to give accurate, real information. And that's what I heard from you.
I was trying to, yeah, I was like.
You know, that, because there's so much misinformation out there, and especially when the further away people get from things,
The harder it is to know what's information or misinformation.
Right. And even in Cleveland, I mean, like, we know the neighborhood of Kudell where Tamir Rice was killed. We know, I mean, and we get information about that, but then, you know, Susan and I go to the bar and people are like, oh, well, you know, here was a 7.5 foot tall thug, you know, like they're
Right.
talking garbage.
So,
and I found the most helpful thing I can do is push back with accurate information. So that's
which is true, and I agree, like, we're doing the same thing, like.
Yeah,
I mean,
so that's my contribution.
Are there good resources out there, like, has anybody written you know, I mean, there's those like Dear White People, and, you know, and it's
Well,
one of those snarky things, but like,
Probably a child's book.
Yeah, well, so one of the discussions that we've had is to read, as a ministry group, which is a grouping of our churches in the area. And I'm gonna throw this out, as like, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but we're showing a group showing Selma. We're doing a group reading of, we're trying to decide between the new Jim Crow and, I don't see you as Asian. What's the title?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't see me.
But I don't see you as Asian, or something like that. And part of the reason why we're really leaning on Bruce's book is because it's not specifically South African American, you know, and pulling this back a little. And again, these are two things that we're doing that I'm like, I don't know, but let's, like, we're just kind of shooting at the wind, I feel like, and I don't have an answer,
But I think,
Just to start a
back to your
discussion.
question, I think, like, as I'm thinking about it, like, I want to hear what you all are actually, like, what did you do in response to this? Not as a, like, did you handle it right or wrong, but like, there's like kind of I think we have to be into an honest conversation as a predominantly white church / white church that, like, how are we talking about it before we can even begin to talk about how should we talk about it? There's like some level of Like, what did we actually do? Like, this was like right here, right now, like, can't be ignored. So, like, did you ignore it? Or I would say couldn't be ignored.
I will be honest, I did before Baltimore.
It was pretty ignored
I pretty much ignored it.
in Columbia.
I think very similarly for Ferguson and for Baltimore, and what, it was like in Cleveland, like each time one of these happened, I made sure that was a week that I included prayers for communities broken by violence, for trust between police and citizens, which was, and the families of the named, whatever named people were involved. And it felt, that felt like the most I could do where I am. Because if I didn't name the police.
So I,
There's no.
That-
No
that's
one's
the
calling on your
difference.
hand.
Community in which, I think we have a lot more license to do a whole lot more, so
Yeah.
I acknowledge that, but, I preached on Ferguson and got pushback from it. A member of our leadership team meeting, and, and that was in August. In December, in the light of the, decisions around Brown, right? It's unfortunate that I can't remember specifically which incident prompted all of our actions, but we canceled adult education to be what was planned to do a conversation about race that everyone was invited to, and it was very well attended, in which out of it emerged a racial justice working group that has met weekly since then to develop ways that we might be a more faithful community, including how we spend our money in outreach through the lens of race. So being very conscious about making sure that the outreach dollars that go out to the world also attend to disparities around race. They came to a decision about, which hasn't been it hasn't been brought to the congregation, but they want to do a project around reparations where they make a significant investment in reparations outreach dollar spending. So it's something that will be named as reparations, but actually the community, and they talked about who they were going to first make that payment to. And they actually decided the best place to do it was a Native American community in Western North Carolina, which I think was smart, because I think it much like, it eliminates this all being about the South or this being about African American. Because race issues very big, and some people need other entrances into it. So at the same time, we have abandoned the issue of race, and particularly African American issues. But also every time we have that, we light candles, we put, we're naming it in the prayers, but we do liturgies around it. It's very front and center.
Well, and I like the idea that you just like we're canceling what we were doing on Sunday at school, and we're gonna talk about it. How am I moderating this thing?
In sharing practical resources that you either know about or have used, so you use them, then sharing how that's actually worked around creating the space to have the conversations among mostly white people who don't get it.
Shamika just tweeted a couple of resources.
And so like the practical resources and the pastoral resources for oneself in pastoring to a group like that.
So another thing that we have done is move beyond the shooting or the incident. And we're talking about the issue of jobs, the issue of rehabilitation after incarceration, the issue of like why.
So I guess I don't really mean like the meta level. I mean more like the practical, like how do you gather with people and prepare them for the conversation. I mean, I know of a resource, Visions Incorporated. They do a lot of training with churches, corporations, lots of different groups around communicating across difference, and they use the lens of racism. Everybody who goes through Episcopal Women's School basically gets trained in this.
Yep.
And one of the big things that they have to frame the conversation is you all agree to a set of norms, and the norms that you agree to are really helpful in how to enter into that conversation. But it takes a lot of like prep work on the front end to get yourself ready to host that, to hopefully have, to teach how that's gonna happen. And then to do the follow through so that you don't just lead people into this big huge conversation and then leave them there. So.
Well, I am also thinking about like, you know, like Elaine's like, oh, my kids are the only ones talking about it. And like, you know, my kids were over talked about it. And I did actually just now happen to think like, the kids in school are creating the space to talk about it. Whatever, they're gathered together to talk about it. I mean, if you work in an office, maybe the office like chatter talks about it, and you either like agree, everybody agrees, you disagree, or like you shut up. But like, do we have a space? Like, isn't that I mean, even like Katie's question, like starting with parameters, starting with, you know, like this is such a huge issue.
Well, and I think the thing you brought up even for this space is really critical to how you create spaces in your own community, because our racial justice working group, which was slated to actually be doing things, would start moving into like a whole guilt session, like a whole conversation about white guilt. And so they had to bring it back and constantly be like, that's another group, right? That's not, it's not that working through all the pain and emotion of what this all means for you as a white person is important. It just also means that's not what we're here to do. And it might mean that we need to create both of those spaces in our communities in order for people to actually be good in the space in which they can do something meaningful for racial justice. They might need to also do working through what it means to have grown up a person of privilege. And
I think a lot of people haven't done that work, and that's like where we have to start. Yeah. And I just wonder, like, if that comes up.
We do quite a bit actually as part of our spiritual gifts inventory. Like we do kind of it sort of walks you through like what are your spiritual gifts and what are the different ones. And in doing that, we do a couple of different identity pieces that like talking about who we are and where we come from and where our story is. And like there's a piece of like talking about privilege as that was pretty helpful for us. It's been so modified over the years, I don't actually know where it comes from. Like our church has been doing it about 12 years now, and I wasn't there when they started this, but that element of identity has been really helpful towards sort of talking about our own privilege and we almost talk about it as a resource, right? Like you have privilege, you get to wield it, like choose what you want to do with it. Like you can either beat people up with it or you can use it to help people. Like, and we do that. I don't know if it's enough of what you're getting at, but identity is one way to go about that maybe.
Which is why I think this is where the faith question comes in. Like, I don't want to have the same discussion that the office group has.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm gonna, I mean, that's fine, but if like I'm gonna pull a group together from my church, I don't want to have, did he not do it to himself in the back of the van? Like, I want to talk about why this is important, how we reacted, how we, you know, whatever. Like, and where are we social sin? Where are we contributors? How do we find grace? How do we, whatever. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think the Thoughtful Christian, if anyone's ever used that before, they have some good resources on there. And I know some of the folks that have written it, so it's some pretty good like entry points. And I think, so I'm Presbyterian, and one of the reasons,
oh wait,
and one of the reasons that I stood or ran for vice moderator was because I was the only person of color on that platform. Which
Yeah,
I
we
think is
noticed.
really right. And so I think we have to move, and this is something I'm working on planning a conversation around racism in the church for the fall in our denomination. It was one of the mandates from the General Assembly. And I think there's something that like the white church, and I don't mean to say it's in a way that points, right? But there's just a privilege that comes with even choosing to have the conversation or not. And that people of color have been struggling with this from the moment that they've been born, right? And so I think the challenge that is like these conversations are going to be uncomfortable and messy, and there's probably not a good way to have it, but to not have it is also a choice, right? And so how do we enter into that and also acknowledge that like this is a new thing? You know, like Ferguson and Baltimore and Staten Island have like their entry points, but I think we also, I mean, when I look at the church, I look at the whole system of the church as well. So we have this long history of how we structure ourselves and our polity and governance that also oppresses and supports systemic racism, right? And so there's no way I think that we can move forward without naming that, but also just like continuing to have that conversation. Like you were saying, you know, you're not sure if reading one book or the other, but at least having that conversation to me is like half of that. To sit in that kind of discomfort and just engage. And I would love to see like what does that look like for us to do that in honest ways instead of just like we want to be diverse or you know like this happened in the news so we should talk about it. We can talk about it, you know, because it happened last week, but then the following Sunday we don't talk about it again because it hasn't been news.
Right.
Because the news is going on.
So this,
Can I ask a question real quick? Just by a show of hands, and this is mostly for the white people in the room. How many of you have a really good, close, black friend that you have in your life, I would say more than once a week? At least one. Really good black friend that is in your life at least once a week.
I'm from Atlanta, so I'm like a piece of rice.
right,
Okay, all right. Because for me,
it's a piece of rice.
the best that I have learned, and I'm not a minister, so I don't have to lead anything that's a faith-based discussion. Okay, like I may or may not bring faith into it. For me, it's all social justice. For me, it's the imprisonment factor. It's all of the beat downs, and literally and figuratively. And I am angry on behalf of my friends who, when I'm sitting at a bar, we talk a lot about sitting at bars. We sit a lot at bars.
Yeah.
But when I'm sitting at a bar and it's mostly white people in the bar, and they're talking about thugs and niggers, and they're talking about all of these people and this problems in the ghetto, and it is Mo, it is Earl, and it is Tina, and it is a whole bunch of my other friends that I work with regularly, and that are my friends, that piss me off enough to tell that guy or woman to shut up, or piss me off enough to actually engage them in conversation that may actually help. And part of it has to do with I know that this is exactly where you all are going, on the faith-based conversation and getting your church involved. But it was honestly Earl who started yelling at people down at 2100 when he was homeless because they were against gay people on my behalf. He's down there saying, I'm not putting up with bigots anymore. And he is screaming at people who he thought were wise, like he's got these, we call them the three wise guys. But there were three old men who sit on the porch, and he would sit there and listen and soak up every kind of information that they had until they started talking about faggots. And I'm not going to be afraid to use the words in here because we've all heard them. We've all heard people use them. And as soon as he heard that, he said, you know what, you guys have reached your limit of giving me any kind of information that I need from you ever again. And he stopped talking about it. Now, that might not be the way to do things, but it wasn't until he got angry because they made him angry. And he cared about us enough and loved us enough to say, that's bullshit. And for me, I mean, the conversation needs to be had and changes need to be made. And feelings will get hurt. But if people aren't strong enough in character to deal with a conversation saying, look, you actually might be a racist. I'm sorry, but we're having this big church conversation here, and you're talking about how you don't want them in the church because they're jobless. That's bullshit. You might be racist if you think that every black person is jobless. And what if they are? Does that mean that every black, does that mean that they can't sweep the floor after the community meal? That they can't help cook something? Does that mean that they can't contribute to the church?
And I think one of the big issues, at least for me, is we're this progressive church.
Right.
So we have the conversation about Jesus and prostitutes and Jesus with the outcast and blah, 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 like all the time.
Right.
But it's even the, like, getting, like Sarah's saying, like, getting to the point where we can say, or at least the few people I'm thinking of, they're considered outcasts. They're considered, you know, like, because it's the whole, I don't see color, you know, like, thing, right? So it's like even the preparation to, it's not always, I mean, yeah, to actually that's, you know, it's a really good point to be able to like have the conversation of we may have to like call you out on that or not, but like how are we gonna deal with all that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I don't think that.
No, I'm just gonna say, and they might be upset and leave, but I mean, seriously, if they're not gonna change their minds, what law is that? I don't know, I'm a very bull and china shop kind of person when it comes to this topic, so.
Which Mythbusters said was not a thing, but yeah, Taryn.
I was doing like kind of a post-externship at an American Baptist church in Napa, which is known for being a highly racist town. And the pastor did a sermon series on, the sermon series was called Black Lives Matter, Not All Lives Matter Till Black Lives Matter. And that was, he's also been at that church for 15 years, so he has a lot of rapport. But that's what he did, and then our Bible study series was about that, and it started off with, the first topic was, we're all a little bit racist.
Right.
Like acknowledging, if you think you're not racist, you're wrong, because we're all a little bit racist, everybody is, and it just sort of spread, I mean, so it was a very like, kind of in your face, we're gonna talk about it, it's not gonna be a soft talk, but people, it grew. And there was one woman who started out convinced that she was not racist, that Napa was not racist, and the pastor said to her, it's because you are a white lady with money. Of course you wouldn't know what racism is, because you've never been treated as anything other than a white person with money. And then that woman started going around to people who would say stuff, and then she'd come back to me and go, wait, I heard this person say this, was I being racist or were they being racist? And I would say, well, that they use this kind of dialogue, so that's racist dialogue, don't use it. But then she would go to that person and say, I talked to Tara and you're being racist, you should stop it. And that was kind of how it spread through the congregation. Yeah, they just call each other out on it, you know? And some people would be like, oh,
everybody's
you're right.
That's right.
What was that?
And then everybody's afraid to say anything.
Well, it didn't turn out that way. People, fortunately, most people went, because I think it was coming from their peers, most people went like, oh, yeah, I shouldn't talk like that, you know? So that's just how it played out at the church, right?
Sure, but I think that is a point well taken, like, and that's kind of where this discussion started, like, we're so afraid. What were you saying?
That's what happened in seminary whenever we had conversations about race. It was like,
All the white people shut up, because how dare I say anything?
talking for too damn long.
Yeah, because we've been talking for so long, so we should shut up. I mean, really, like, that's.
Well, I just got out most of the bad words, so if you'd like to use them.
It depends on the discussion. I mean, and this is like I mean, this is why okay, this is my opinion, right? So I don't know the answer to that, except for yes and no. Like, I should shut up and let Shamika speak about her experience. I should not speak for her experience when she's right here in this place at this time. It is not time for me to shut up when the situation like Tara's talking about, when we're having a group discussion, when we're like saying, tell me, like when I'm being inquisitive, when I'm speaking from a different perspective. No, I don't think we should shut up. I think that's part of the problem is we're like, okay, I got in trouble, not in trouble. I got a long email from my mother the day after my post went up that was very angry for, now she's Midwestern, so how dare I display our dirty laundry to the world, right? I mean, that's
the problem.
yeah, right, 'cause, you know. And then basically the last line is, but I guess it's true. So it's, I mean, so like, how dare you talk about this publicly? And like, that's what hit home to me of, that was the whole point, was I have to stop being afraid about talking about this publicly. Like, I have to stop. Like, there's a difference between it being baggage for me and it using it to say, I am free from this. This was my experience. I mean, you're not ever really free from it, but like telling the story actually frees me. And that's where speaking for Shamika is not allowing her to tell her story, but I also don't like shame myself in the baggage and shut up and sit in the corner. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I guess I was thinking of my seminary context where it was very multiracial and needed to shut myself up.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this, and in our liturgical, like in our liturgy, we have built into it, certainly in the PCUSA, we have a prayer of confession that we say as a corporate body. In these conversations on race, what is the role of corporate confession for corporate sins? And would that be the jumping off place to talk about this? We are implicitly or explicitly involved in this miscarriage of justice, or lack thereof. Shouldn't we be confessing these sins in that? Isn't that the moment? Like, are we called to confess?
Yeah. But again, I think, I'm sorry, somebody else speak, but I think it goes back to the point of we have to recognize, we have to as a body agree that this is a sin. Like that, which is where you have to get to, at least in a white church, you have to start with people are oppressed. You have to, like, in order to admit the sin, you have to, like, well, I think that's the problem with, and that's where I have interpreted the, well, all lives matter. You're not understanding why you have to say this out loud. You're not understanding that we're talking about an oppressed group of people.
I think one of the things that I'm constantly aware of is how we engage people or get people to enter a conversation and not immediately have them be an opponent, whatever you're saying. So following the Ferguson incident, there was a blog post that actually was part of what fueled my sermon about it, but Janae Woods wrote, it's like, had to be a white ally in the aftermath of Michael Brown. And the piece about it that I thought was really important was, if you're not doing anything, then you are racist, right? Like that's like, and so in the sermon, when I spoke about it, I started with the, like, let's just assume none of us are at fault for it, right? Like, in fact, it's not our, we didn't do it, it's not our fault, but like, look at the world and like, something's wrong, and we're responsible to it, right? So instead of like moving people from the whole conversation about shame and blame and saying like, listen, you may or may not be a racist, you may or may not, right? Like, we don't have to even resolve all that today. We do have to resolve that these shootings continue to happen, that there seems to be an issue with police brutality. We need to be having conversations about that, because as Christian community, we're called to speak to those issues in the world, where there's injustice, where people are hurting and suffering, and where there's some kind of clear imbalance of power and privilege. So, like, trying to find spaces like that in any of our conversations are, I think, really important to getting people to the table.
I really liked, Jerry, Sarah, do you remember, Jason did a lot of it, you guys probably did too, the hashtag that went around about telling, like, the white stories of, like, when we were pulled over, when we were arrested, when we were blah, blah, blah. Criming while white, and like, I really kind of appreciated that, like, level of discussion of, like,
To use my, it was also like, they use my face instead of.
Yeah, the youth when they were-
And for the target practice, but there's some.
right. And we were, a lot of us, especially like, we're taking pictures in clergy collars and like children and whatever, like, would you do this, you know, how would this feel or whatever. And it's just one of those like consistent discussions of, again, not replacing a conversation with people of color, but adding to it by saying, like, listen, yeah, I was pulled over and I was obviously drunk and they let me go, like, and didn't, I actually was driving up here and a cop had a car pulled over, probably for speeding, and didn't see anything but two African-American hands out the window, like both of them up. And I just kept thinking, like,
Never would have to do that.
I would never have to do that. Now, again, I think it was a political statement on that guy's part, not like that the cop made him put his hand in the air before he approached. But even that political statement was like, I would never have to do that. And just, it was a beautiful kind of symbol to drive by and just remind myself how I'm speeding down the road and don't think I was minded. But again, I think telling those stories, creating that space, and yeah, taking the shame out of it. And we, like, when you start with we all screw up and everybody screws up, we're all sinners. When you start with a confession, I am very, and maybe this is me being like wimpy, but I don't think I'm wimpy. I mean, I really don't, but like, I'm very nervous about a one-way conversation from a pulpit that in any way looks like bullying. Katie worked with me for a while, and she was there on, when was it? It was Trayvon Martin, when George Zimmerman was acquitted, and it was the day after. I was literally preaching a sermon on racial warfare it was the David and Goliath story, and how this is a racial war. And I'm like, how can I preach the sermon and not recognize this verdict? But I was angry. Like, I was angry when I did it. And I had a member almost leave the church, we reconciled, but like, that was the closest Katie would maybe say, I didn't bully, but I did very strongly give my opinion. And I actually, like, it was really hard that I used my point of privilege that day for my own catharsis. Which, right, we do all the time, like, but
Yeah, but
it was not okay in that setting.
was it your own catharsis only, right? Like, what, to not speak to the issue is its own, right? Like,
True.
I don't know. For me, what was so painful after our church member left, right, was I have found myself in places where I choose not to enter the conversation because of what it meant and what I lost in that, and how painful it was to not be reconciled to my parishioner. And still not, right? I mean, like, as much as I did the pastoral work of trying to be reconciled, it never has happened. And so that is hardly, across the bear, considering what we're talking about, but that changes you, right? And so I am constantly working against that feeling like I don't want to be in that shit space again. Because that shit space felt really shitty for a long time. Like, I would not, before I preached on Sunday morning, it's hard to sleep.
Yeah.
And I'd be like preaching on like spiritual gifts. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was
right, yeah.
there. We were
Yeah.
like,
Like, it's my sleep. Wait, why am I not sleeping?
So.
Well, and what's interesting is he came up to me after the sermon that I preached after the riots, and was like in tears. And my first instinct was like, shit, I did it wrong. Like, not, maybe after 2 years, something's going on. But I did it wrong because he wasn't upset. Which was a weird, really weird feeling. And like, I think that's the, like, my intention is never to create conflict, but like, and I wasn't upset that they weren't upset, but at the same time, it felt like I had done it wrong. But we were hurt, like everybody was hurt.
I also wonder, like, when preaching, if it makes sense to actually just name, like, this is the beginning of the conversation, right? My job here is not to come and preach at you about this, but I am going to preach about this, and then, like, I am doing this out of a space of, like, real commitment to believing that God would expect us to be having these conversations, but 12 to 15 minutes on Sunday morning is the beginning of this conversation. So please let us all be in conversation to go from this place about how we'll continue to be conversing, being agents of change around this specific injustice.
I
A couple of different things. One is there's a pastor in New York City, Jackie Lewis, and Middle Collegiate, who's awesome. And she's done some talks around using conflict as a value, that we need to learn as churches to value conflict, because it's only through conflict that you can actually grow and change and become whole and healed. So that's sort of something that I just offer out there. I struggle with sort of sometimes how to do it, this stuff, these conversations, because there's part of me that has the righteous anger, you know, and for me that's always, like, especially been around sexual assault and women's issues, like, I can get angry like that if you say something that pisses me off.
I know nothing about that.
But the problem is that then people don't listen to you, and they don't hear you, and they don't even want to talk to you. And so, especially in churches, I think of it like conversations with my extended family who all live in Texas, and you know, I love it, but who come from a certain perspective. And so when I'm talking to my extended family through my blogs, I'm constantly aware of how they're going to hear it, and I'm constantly aware of how do I speak in a way that tells the story, but allows them entry into it. They have to be able to see themselves enter into this story and to hear someone else's story without it accusing them, without it condemning them. And so how do I create these places of story where they can hear another voice? And that is what I feel like is our job as pastors, is that when we do our storytelling, that we're opening up spaces for questions and conversation and lifting up stories that might not otherwise be heard, and being careful not to frame them in a way that shuts people down, but that they can actually hear the humanity and the story and connect with it on some level. So there's that I just want to put out there. I also want to hear from some other people. I love you, but I want to hear from some other people if it's okay.
I also think the important thing when I try and do that kind of thing too, I think a lot about some relatives in my extended family that I know hold different views on this, and I want them to be like, could they hear this and enter into the conversation? But then I also think of my friends. They're like, would they be proud of me? Was I representative of the true nature of this story as well? And so it's got to be, I always find like I try and balance it.
Right. When I'm protesting, I'm speaking out. And when I'm speaking to someone I want to continue to be in a relationship with, I'm going to use a different tone.
Yeah. I was just going to say, as a congregation member and not as a pastor, what I want is, okay, I feel like I'm on the right path toward helping social justice happen. But I know that there's always so much more to learn. Like, I mean, and talking with Mo, talking with Earl, talking so much about different things. But then, and I mentioned this morning, I mean, first of all, I had no idea that Black people need to put cream in their hair, because as white people, my hair, at least me, my hair gets greasy as can be. So like just even body differences are something that it took me years to even be able to have a conversation about. Because I was so scared of, of offending somebody. But then I got to the point where I had a conversation with her once, and he was talking about a commercial. And it was so helpful for me to hear him say this because it opened my eyes. And once you see it, you won't unsee it. And I mentioned this morning, but it was a commercial with 3 ladies, and it had something to do with food. I think it was like an Arby's commercial or something. And it was 3 ladies, 2 of them were white, 1 was black. And Earl said, did you notice how the black woman's only line was, Like the 2 women were talking back and forth about this new sandwich that they love at Arby's or whatever, and she made a noise. Like that, her whole line was to make a very carnal noise. And I didn't even realize how even in this commercial, there was a racist aspect to it. And as a congregation member, what I want is to be, okay, if you're in this conversation, let me walk away with another way that I am aware that that my white privilege is keeping someone else down, so that I can work on it my own self personally, with so I can see and I can stand up for those. And because if I don't know, if I walk away from a conversation and still don't know, then I'm still going to do all the stuff that pushes people down where people of color. And I'm not going to do it intentionally, but it's going to happen. So, give people action items, I guess is what I'm saying. Sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
So this is a little bit in a different direction, so I don't work for a church, I work for a nonprofit with other mission experiences. And I think one of the things that I've realized most in doing this work is that the bulk of racism that I've seen with the youth that come through the program has to do with service. And it comes through mission because so much of it is these white churches who go into mission, who go to urban areas, and then they do this entire thing where it's, well, we're here to serve. And so I try to really be intentional about finding agencies that are already run by people of color and working with them so that they can see volunteer coordinators, they can see directors, they can see folks who are working on boards that are not white. And we're trying to urge the adult leaders for groups in those churches to find those agencies in their own context. So just wanted to offer that.
So we have reached our time. Thank you all, and we'll continue the conversation. This was just the beginning.
Stick around for money.
Money.